We're going to now jump into defining resilience. We learned a little bit about stress, particularly how chronic stress can impact our minds, body, and behavior, and that provides a context in which we need to pursue becoming resilient, because it's in the face of stress that we have to demonstrate resilience, because if we don't, we can actually develop mental health problems, and it can impact our overall well-being and the quality of life we have. So when was resilience first really studied? It was first studied in kind of kids who were being reared in the most difficult and troublesome conditions. Kids who basically didn't have parents, they lived in intense poverty, and we studied a subpopulation of kids who lived under those conditions and were achieving normal development and being successful despite having the cards stacked up against them. So resilience was really originally conceptualized as these individuals who grow up in extreme adversity yet are still doing well in life. Basically, the odds said they shouldn't do well in life, but they were. And so originally research was devoted on studying young children who were able to become successful in adults, yet they faced a variety of what we call risk factors, things that would indicate that they shouldn't do too well throughout their development. We now know that everybody experiences adversity. It's relative, the amount of adversity, but we all have things that could potentially impact our well-being and that are perceived as stressors and could cause wear and tear on our minds, body, and behavior. Now resilience is more of a universally applied term. And there's really two elements to it that are consistent with that two-dimension or two-continuum model of mental health that we've discussed. The first is what we call surviving. And to survive, that's about developing the capacity, ability, skill set, routines, whatever you want to say, in order to bounce back from adversity. So if you have a loved one die, do you have the skills to actually bounce back from what is a stressful situation? If you're going through an economically hard time yourself or your family, do you have the ability to cope and manage that situation? Can you survive that moment and come out the other side better? So there's the survival dimension. So we say really it's the ability to manage and life stressors and continue to pursue and do well in the face of adversity. The other element to resilience is what we call the thrive element. And thrive means doing what matters most, enhancing, optimizing your well-being. Basically, you don't have to be under stress or confronted with any major challenge or stressor in order to enhance and optimize your well-being. So are you engaging in intentional practices, routines, and habits that optimize how well you feel, you spend more time in a happy state, you are getting the most out of life, and ultimately when you reflect on your life, you view it as something that's highly satisfying, fulfilling, and meaningful. So throughout this course, we're going to be talking about resilience as having kind of these two heads to it, both being kind of survive and thrive. So resilience is ultimately your ability to survive and thrive in life. Ann Maston from the University of Minnesota is probably the foremost expert in the concept of resilience, and she has now defined resilience as ordinary magic. And what she means by this is you don't have to be born with resilience. It's not something that you either have this genetic endowment that affords you the ability to be resilient, and if you're not born with it, well, you're screwed. Well, that doesn't fit with modern day research. It also isn't necessarily luck. So it's not something that's just a random serendipitous occurrence in someone's life. And so this notion of ordinary magic means resilience can be cultivated. Resilience can be acquired, and it comes through having the awareness, engaging in intentional practices, being open to learning, applying and integrating particular lifestyle choices, habits, and routines into one's life. So it's a matter of what we do and we seek to acquire that defines whether we can become resilient or not. And it's not a matter of being born with it or simply being lucky in life. Like any good cooking recipe, resilience is a combination of ingredients. So imagine for a second something that you cook really well. there's certain ingredients that have to go into that recipe in order for you to get that end product, which is a really delicious meal. Resilience is the same way. Research has been able to uncover specific ingredients that if people intentionally incorporate or integrate into their life, it produces the end result, which is the ability to survive and thrive in life. We will discuss a range of things that you can do in your life to become resilient, including mindfulness-based practices, values clarification and commitment, which seems a bit confusing and ambiguous now, but it will make sense later on when we dive into that resiliency practice area. We'll talk about how to purposefully cultivate positive emotions. Negative emotions get most of the airplay or attention, but positive emotions actually lead to a lot of resilient benefits and increase our well-being. So we'll talk about what you can do specifically to cultivate positive emotions to feel better. We'll also go on the different side of the emotional coin, and we'll talk about negative emotions. Not negative emotions being bad, but when they become too intense, how we can do things that are highly regrettable and are self-defeating when we're under the influence of negative emotions. We'll also dive into the idea of connecting with others in very meaningful ways, either through mentorships, seeking social support, as well as selecting really good role models. These are other elements to becoming a resilient person. We'll talk about TLCs. This is therapeutic lifestyle choices, specific healthy lifestyle choices that are cheap and readily available, yet produce huge benefits in terms of physical, emotional, and psychological well-being. And we'll end this with developing a roadmap for our future. And this roadmap will lay out a plan for how we intend to integrate resilience ingredients into our lives tomorrow, a week from now, a month from now, a year from now, and hopefully decades from now. So you can continue to strive to become resilient and be able to survive in the face of risk factors and adversity and thrive to optimize our well-being. So far, we've discussed two really important concepts, and that is stress and resilience. Within each one of these, we discuss kind of critical elements of understanding that will lay the foundation for the rest of the lessons in this course. So I want to make sure that you're walking away after having covered these two concepts with kind of the essential take-home messages. So the first thing I want you to walk away with is that stress, and to recognize that stress is unavoidable in life, and that not all stress is bad. Remember the Yerkes-Dodson curve. Moderate but manageable levels of stress are actually good for our performance. It's really when stress becomes too intense that it can produce a wear and tear on our body. The second point is that chronic stress is very toxic to our bodies, our minds, and our behavior. It can produce significant health problems in terms of cardiovascular health problems and the development of illnesses such as diabetes. It can impact our minds in the ability to think clearly, problem solve situations, be optimistic in the face of adversity, and last, it impacts our behaviors. We do things that we later regret. We act aggressively towards someone else. We avoid things we shouldn't. We take a really we withdraw from situations because we no longer see the importance of them. And ultimately, we can engage in things like substance abuse as well as other maladaptive ways to cope with life stressors. Another take-home point is that stress impacts our mental health fundamentally, but that our mental health, the modern conceptualization of mental health, is that it falls on two dimensions or continuum. The first is that what we call the stress continua, and we have to do things to actively manage and minimize that. The other part of our mental health is our well-being continuum. So we have to purposely and intentionally do things that optimize our well-being and quality of life and satisfaction. So when we think about resilience, we also think about stress and overall our mental health. Then we touched on resilience as being ordinary magic. Resilience, remember, is defined by the ability to survive in the face of adversity and thrive in order to optimize our well-being and our performance. But it's ordinary magic in the sense that we can learn it, we can acquire it. It comes through purposeful activities and the integration of specific skills, habits, and routines into our life. And we've discussed that there are certain ingredients, like a good cooking recipe, that we can combine in order to become resilient. And that's what we're going to spin moving forward, is what are these ingredients that go into the resilient recipe.